Hi, this is Pastor Josh, and I just want to thank you for watching or listening to these teachings. Our hope is that through these teachings that you would learn more about God and grow closer to Him in relationship. But we also hope that these would be an additional teaching to what you already receive in your church home. If you don't have a church home, we would love to have you here at Cornerstone. So we do pray that through these teachings that you would hear God through the proclamation of His Word.
Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from the supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." So, over the past year, a little over a year now, we've been going through the book of John, and we've seen Jesus do great miracles and great signs. He has turned water into wine. That was his first one. He's fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and 5 pieces of bread. He has healed sick people. He has caused the blind people to see. He has called crippled people to be able to walk. And recently, he has raised a dead man. He brought him back to life. We've seen all these things that Jesus has done, but now we come to John chapter 13, and we see something that we really have not seen Jesus do yet. And it's really astounding. And it may not sound astounding at first, but I hope that as we look through the scripture that you'll see this is an astounding thing that Jesus does, and he displays for you and I to see. So before we look at it, here's the question for you this morning. Are you prepared to turn from the things that you're not believing about God and to believe in what he says is true? Are you prepared this morning to actually receive what God is going to tell you through his word? Are you ready to adjust your lives, whether it's hard, maybe it's easy? Are you ready to adjust your life this morning to what God says? Because if you're not, then this really isn't going to be helpful to you. But if you are, if you're ready to adjust your life this morning, the Lord will show you something. The Lord will reveal you something. What is it that he's going to reveal? Let's find out. Look in your passage to verse 1 and 3. Chapter 1, or verse 1 says this, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." Now verse 3, he says, "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and was going back to God." This is what this tells us so far. It tells us where Jesus was, or at least the Son of God was in the past, but it also tells us where the Son of God, Jesus, would be in the future. That's what it says in verses 1 and 3. Verse 1, Jesus knew his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. So that tells us right here and now that in the future, Jesus is going to be with Father God. Verse 3 also emphasizes that. Jesus, knowing the Father had given all things into his hand, he had come from God, we'll get into that in just a moment, and was going back to God. You see that? The future of Jesus was he was going to be with God the Father. Verse 3 also tells us the past of Jesus, that he was with God. He had come from God. So what we're being told right now about Jesus is that his past, he existed with God. He came from God. This is where he's at today, but then we also know his future, he's about to go back to the Father and be with God. That's what John has been telling us. And what is the present? What's happening to him right now? He's at a supper. Verse 2. During supper. Now, we get mixed up with dinner and supper, right? This is an evening meal. So let's just say an evening meal. So Jesus' present is what? An evening meal. His past was that he came from God and was with God. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? John 1:1. His future is that he's going to go back to God and be with his Father. But right now, where's he at? At an evening meal. So we have the past, we have the present, and we have the future of Jesus. Now, why is this important to you and I this morning? Well, the important thing is that the past and the present are going to illuminate what he is doing, or the past and the future is going to illuminate what he's doing in the present. See, it says that he's going to be forever with God, and he was always with God in the beginning. There is no other being in the world that has a beginning like Jesus and an end like Jesus. It says here, or let me put it this way, the devil, the demons, even angels, they were not with God and come from God because at one point God created them. But with Jesus, the Son of God, God did not create him. He eternally existed with God. Why is that important? Because it shows the uniqueness of Jesus. It shows you that he is unlike anyone or anything. Now, how does that affect our passage? How does that affect our passage? Think about this. The Queen of England, everyone. She's royalty. That's we think about royalty today. She's one of the ones that we can still think of. She has a castle and a kingdom, and she is the queen, and she has a throne, and she has, what do you call that thing? A crown, right? A crown with jewels and diamonds and gold and silver or whatever, platinum. She has that. She has a robe, and she has all these sorts of things because she is royalty. We know that Christ Jesus is, in fact, royalty. He came from God the Father. He was with God the Father for all of eternity past, whatever that means, right? And it tells us he will be right with God the Father in the future. But right now, this royalty is eating an evening meal with humanity. God in human flesh. Emmanuel is that name. God with us. Now let me go back to the Queen. The Queen of England is royalty. And this would be shocking to us if the Queen one day decided, I'm going to go into the city. And so she leaves her throne, she leaves her castle, and she goes into the city, and she finds the filthiest part of the city. She goes down into one of the alleys, and there's some people down there that are dirty, filthy. Their teeth are messed up because they don't have any dentist to help them. They don't have any money to help them. Their hands are all dirty because they don't have any showers or baths or anything. They have feces on them because they use the restroom right there, and then sometimes they lay in that. And this royalty, this queen, comes down to that alley, and then she takes off her robe, and she takes off her crown, and she takes off all the royalty that she has, and she gets a towel with some water, and then she begins to wash the feet of these people in this alley. If that happened today, everyone, you know what would happen, right? It would be all over the news. all over the world because of her status as royalty. And the world recognizes that and sees that, and they would be perplexed or confused. This would be a scene to see the queen doing these things. It didn't make sense. Verses 1 and 2 and 3 that tell us the past, the present, and the future of Jesus is to shock us like that would shock us. To see the queen washing the feet of someone in the alley. How much greater then should we be shocked and astonished and mesmerized by Jesus, the Son of God, who was with him in eternity past and saw creation and made creation, and then he came from God into human flesh on the earth with the sinfulness of man, the evil and wickedness of humanity that I don't have to describe to you. You know it. We see it all the time. And he comes to this evening meal, and then in the future he's going back. This royalty is here to wash the feet of humanity. Does that make sense now? A little bit? That's what's happening in John 13. Jesus is washing the disciples' feet. And it should take us back. It should make us stop breathing. It should make us just stop and pray and to say, God, what are you doing here? What are you doing? What's happening? That was Peter's reaction. The reaction we should have was Peter's reaction. Look what he says in verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Lord, Master, Teacher, you're going to wash my feet? No, that doesn't make any sense, Jesus. Why would you wash my feet? Now listen to the statement that Jesus makes. Jesus answered him, What I am doing, you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Listen to that. What I am doing now, Peter, you don't understand yet, but you will understand. The benefit of that is this. You and I get to understand what Jesus is doing. Where we are shocked by Jesus washing feet, where we may say, what are you doing? And he tells Peter, look, Peter, you don't understand, but you're going to. Just wait. For you and I, it's the same thing. You may not understand, but you're going to. I hope you will by the end of our time. You're going to understand what God is doing, what Jesus is doing. This is what we're seeking this morning, to understand why he does this. What is the reason for this? What does it mean to wash the disciples' feet? I don't know about you, but how many of y'all have washed someone's feet recently? Now, we wash our kids' feet, right? Because we give them baths. But that's a given. Maybe you wash one of your mother's feet as they're laying in bed and they can't wash their feet anymore, or their father or your father's feet, or something like that. But washing feet isn't something that we do today. It's weird. It sounds weird to us to wash someone's feet. But back in the day, back in Jesus' day, in this present time at the evening meal, when you walked with sandals in filthy dirt and you entered into a home, if the home was really, if they had good manners, good courtesy, they would provide you water and a towel, and they would provide a servant, a slave, who would wash your feet for you. But that task was really only meant for the servant. The disciples, like Jesus, you had a teacher and then, teacher. Let's just say teacher and followers. Even followers didn't have to wash their disciples' feet or their teacher's feet. It was meant for the low of the low. You know, occasionally you may have your children wash your feet, but it was really this attitude of that's for the servant. And if they didn't have a servant, you would wash your own feet. But the point is, it was a common thing all the time. If I came over to your house, you would say, here's some water, here's some towels, and here's someone to wash your feet. If you didn't have that servant, you you would just leave it there for me, and I would wash my own feet. So then I could enter into your house clean, and I could, they didn't have the tables. They laid down at the table on the ground, and they would eat all laying down, reclined around the table. And so you would clean your stinky feet before you ever walked in. Now, we may take off our shoes, right? That's like the equivalent of what we do. But this is something that only a slave would do in reality, is to wash your feet. So what's happening here? Because Jesus is washing the feet, not the servant. Well, Jesus comes to this place to eat the evening meal, and a servant hasn't been provided for them. Water and a towel has not been provided for them to wash their own feet. And they're going to lie down to eat, and Jesus recognizes the need to wash the feet before we do these things. And so Jesus himself, he does 7 things. Now there's a key point there. The number 7, the number of completion, that number of perfection. God created the world in how many days? 7 days, or 6, and then he rested on the 7th, right? Or he ceased from worship, ceased from doing it. So 7 days is this picture of perfection. Now watch this staircase of 7 here. Ready? Verse 2, during supper, when the devil had already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing the Father had given him all things into his hand, that he had come from God, was going back to God. Verse 4, here we go. We're going to start the 7. He rose from the supper. That's number 1. He laid aside his outer garments. That's number 2. Taking a towel, number 3. He tied it around his waist, number 4. He put water in a basin, number 5. He began to wash the disciples' feet, number 6. Number 7, he wiped them with the towel. 7 steps to washing the disciples' feet, a complete service act of the Lord. And what these 7 steps reveal to us, it's almost, this is the royalty of God. And with each step, we see humility. When he rose from the supper, and he took off his garments, and he filled the basin, and he tied the towel, and then he washed the feet, and then he cleaned the feet with the towel. You see royalty coming off the throne to the lowest part of a person, really, the feet. I mean, it'd be pretty humbling to have you wash my feet, right? Or for me to wash your feet. There's something about, we don't like to show each other's feet. That's one of the things that we don't, we show our hands, because that's just kind of what we do. Sometimes we show our legs when we wear shorts, or arms when we wear shirts. But sometimes people don't like to show their feet. Even when they wear sandals, they wear socks, which doesn't make sense, because when you wear socks with that one toe, that's just a weird feeling, right? So we cover our feet so often, even in this day. Now imagine that day, and imagine royalty of Jesus coming down and stooping that low. Philippians tells us very well what he was doing. He did not consider himself equal with God, even though he was, but he humbled himself by becoming a man and leaving heaven. He left that glory. Philippians chapter 2 tells us. Let me read these steps to you again. I'm going to tell you this. Rose from the supper. He laid aside his outer garment, taking a towel, tied it around his waist, poured water in a basin, began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He rose up. Listen to this. Because he was with God and he came from God to the earth. He rose up off of his throne in the heavenly realm where he was receiving the glory. That's a very picture of what he's doing. He rose up off of his throne as he rose here from the supper. He laid aside his glory as he laid aside his outer garment. He would take these outer clothes off. So it's really likely he may just be in these little bitty shorts. That's it. Jesus, not bare naked, but bare just in some shorts or something. He took off his outer garment and laid it aside after he rose from supper. And in heaven, he rose from the throne and he laid aside his robe of glory that all the angels and all the spiritual beings that were there, praising him, calling him holy, 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 he laid it aside. that outer garment. And it says he took a towel and he tied it around his waist, just as he took on human flesh and was born as a human. Why we celebrate Christmas. He put on this human flesh and tied it to him, the Son of God who existed from all eternity. He began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with a towel. This is Christ Jesus when he gets upon the cross and he wipes the sin away from your heart by bearing it on the cross. Can you see the service of God? The servanthood of Jesus Christ? These steps of royalty that he does here in the disciples washing the feet is also a picture of him leaving heaven to serve us on earth for our benefit and his glory. That doesn't make any sense. It's one thing to wipe someone's feet off. It's another thing to take someone's sin. And Jesus does both. Jesus does both of those, y'all. He wiped the dirt off of the disciples' feet, and he wiped the dirt of sin off of the heart of a person by doing it on the cross. So what is John 13 about? Washing these feet? This is what it's about. It is about the cross. It is about pointing you to the cross. When he tells Peter, you do not understand right now, Peter, but you will. You will understand these things later. And as he's on the cross, this is where Peter can start to say, this was what he was doing. He left the heavenly places for us. I thought washing feet was one thing, but this is another. The astonishing thing to wash feet, but this is ridiculous. Royalty, dying. Let me say it. God dying. How can God die? Here's what's interesting about this passage. You ready? Besides all of that, right? This makes it that much more interesting. It says that he washed Peter's feet, and that was Peter's response. But it doesn't only say he washed Peter's feet. It says that he washed Judas's feet. Think about this. Judas. And now we start to understand why John has written these details about the devil in Judas's heart in verse 13. Look at verse 5 again. He poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet. This includes Judas, everyone. Now look at verse 2. Here's the context. He says, during supper, now watch this. When the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray Jesus. That is the heart of Judas. Judas's heart is, I am going to betray Jesus. Judas's heart at this point is in partnership with the devil, the one from whom many ages before Judas ever existed had rebelled against God, was one of the original rebellious beings. The one who caused Adam and Eve, or tempted Adam and Eve, and has been doing these damaging things throughout the whole time. This same devil who is in partnership with Judas now. That's the picture that John wants you to have and God wants you to have at this supper. Judas, the friend of the devil, who has it in his heart to betray Jesus. And you remember in chapters 11 and 12, Judas was mad at the woman pouring perfume on Jesus' feet because that perfume could have been sold for money, not to give to the poor, even though that's what he said, but so that he could put it in his pocket. This Judas. This is the Judas we're talking about. The Judas that we'll see in just a few chapters is the one who goes and tells the Jewish leadership, I know where Jesus is, and if you want him, give me some money. And he gets that money, and then he goes to Jesus, and he says, Jesus, my master, and he kisses him, and with that kiss, he betrays him, because now they recognize and know who Jesus is, And that's what's going to lead him to the crucifixion. This Judas, everyone. Now, Jesus isn't unaware of this. He knows exactly what's happening. He says here in verse 10 to Peter, "You are clean, but not every one of you." Not every one of you. He is declaring right here and there, I know that Judas is not clean. I know that he's not. Look at verse 11. For he knew who was to betray him. See, this is what's interesting. All these verses are included in John chapter 13. It is to show us who Judas was. He knew who was going to betray him. That's why he said, not all of you are clean. Not all of you are clean. Look at verse 18. I'm not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. He's talking about Judas. When they dipped their hand together and he says, this is the one who will betray me, the one who has his hand in the jar with me. So here's the picture that we're getting here of the present. They're at a supper. Jesus sees the need to wash the feet, so he gets up and he humbles himself to wash the feet. And Peter is one who is astonished. He's saying, you're the teacher, you're the master, you're the Lord. You don't wash feet. Only servants wash feet. We don't even wash feet. Why are you washing feet? And he says, look, if you can't accept this, you can't have anything to do with me. And you'll understand this later on, pointing to the cross. But then you and I, we're recognizing that he did not only wash Peter's feet, but he washed Judas's feet, the one who was in partnership with the devil, the one who was going to betray Jesus. Betrayal. What a dark word, right? Betrayal. Everyone probably in this room knows what betrayal feels like. Maybe it was your spouse that betrayed you. Your child that betrayed you, your parent that betrayed you, your friend that betrayed you, your coworker that betrayed you. You've experienced it. Betrayal. That's why I said it's a dark word, because it comes with those dark emotions and those dark feelings and the pain and the separation and the tearing. And Jesus, we're told here, knows that Judas is going to betray him. You got the picture in your head now. And Jesus, just like he did Peter, he sat down on his knee, or kneeled on his knee. Let me do it for you. One thing with Peter, who says, Lord, how can you do this? It's another thing with Judas, the one who would be the betrayal. And he said, Judas, let me see your feet. Judas, let me see your feet. And he takes Judas's feet and he begins to wash them with water, using his own hands to wipe off the dust, the filth, the stink. And then he gets his towel and he wipes them clean and dries them. Judas, the betrayal. How could Jesus do that? How could you wash Judas's feet? Don't wash his feet. Now, even though he washed his feet, he still said, Peter, you're clean, but there's still some of you one of you that's not clean. He was pointing to Judas. So even though he's done this act, it doesn't make Judas clean, because Judas has a heart that doesn't want him. Now think about that. Here's what's good news for you and I. Some of us are Judas. You hear me? Some of us have never wanted God. Some of us, in fact, have partnered with what the devil does, the things of this world. We want this rather than God. But just like Jesus washed the feet of Judas, he died on a cross to take care of the defilement of your sin, despite your rebellion and your betrayal to him. See, Judas, you can look at Judas all you want, but we have to look in the mirror at some point and say, wow, we're Judas. And isn't it good news all of a sudden, right? That Jesus would bow down and washed the feet of Judas, because that means that you and I have the opportunity to be cleansed from all of sin. That's an amen point, everyone. But not only that, there's another point to this that we have to see with Judas. Because, yeah, it can mean that your betrayal, you don't like Jesus, you don't want anything to do with God all your life. But now, today, this day, you're understanding this. And we hope that you would believe upon this. You hope that you would remember these things. But here's the other thing. This is what it tells us. Judas was a disciple of Jesus, meaning he was really close to him. For 3 years of his life, he was with them all day, every day. What that tells you and I is that you can grow up in the church, friends. You can grow up in the church all your life. You can grow up with a Christian family that reads the Bible to you, and maybe you just say the same prayers that they say. You can do the activities of church and what it means to be a Christian. You could be what is called a Christian, have the title of Christian, because Judas had the title of disciple. You can be so near the Lord and not know the Lord. That was Judas. And I don't know if that's you this morning. You've been walking near the Lord all your life. You know all the language. You know all the activities. But do you have the heart of Judas? Or do you have a heart that loves the Lord? Do you cling to Him because you say, Lord, how can you wash my feet? How? You see, Judas didn't say that. Judas sat back. Wash my feet, Lord. Go ahead. That's a difference in an attitude between Peter and Judas. That's a difference in an attitude where when Jesus says to Peter, on this rock I will build my church. And Peter, feed my sheep. Tend my sheep. Take care of my sheep. Whereas Judas was killed. That's the difference between you. Is that you can be like Judas and have your guts spilled, right? That's what happened. In a place of hell. Or you can be with the Lord for all eternity and enjoy the things that Peter enjoyed, a relationship with the Lord and an eagerness to get back to Jesus. What do you want? You want to be Peter? You want to be Judas? Here's the reality, is that Christ has died on the cross, not to wash our feet, but to wash us clean from sin, everyone. That's what He was doing. And that's exactly what this picture is. He washes the feet to show us this reality. So, what describes you this morning? Judas, Peter, the creator of all the world. Because Colossians 1 says that it was Jesus, the Son of God, who created things. All things were created by Him and through Him. No thing was created except by Him. So He's created all things. He's in the heavenly realms. He gets off of His throne. He takes off His royalty, His glory. He comes down in human flesh. He lives 30 years in filth and wickedness, surrounded by this. And then He dies on a cross, but wait a minute. He doesn't deserve to die on a cross. He doesn't deserve to die. He's never sinned. How can this be? That's the attitude of Peter. How can you do this? The attitude of you and I should be that. How can you die, Jesus? You've never done anything wrong. He says, I die in place of you. I die in place of you. King Jesus, who we are told in the Bible that every knee will bow down before Him and worship Him. Every knee in the whole world one day will bow down to Jesus. But before they ever bow down, listen to this. Jesus, who should have never had to bow down, He bowed down to us and He washed the disciples' feet. He bowed down to us and died upon a cross. Majesty, glory, the King of Kings, everyone. He bowed down on His knee to do these things, to rescue us. That's some good news. We don't get it. We should marvel. We should say, I don't get it. Why could he do this? Why would he do this? It is to show us exactly who he is. If you want to know who God is, this is who he is. One who loves, one who rescues, one who serves. How can the king serve? It's supposed to be the other way around. I serve because this is who I am. If you have any doubt of who God is, this is who he is. He's shown us himself. But here's what we haven't read, is that he doesn't end the story there, this event, this reality. He doesn't end it there. He has something else to say real quick. He goes, wait, but let me finish because I'm not finished yet. In verse 12, he says, when he had washed their feet and put out his armor, he put on his outer garment, so he put them back on and resumed his place, which, by the way, when he goes back to the Father, what he's going to do, right? What has he done? He's put back on his glory, and he is sitting at the right hand of the Father. And that's why he says, all authority has been given unto me, because it's his, and he's ready to rescue once again. So knowing this now, he says, do you understand what I have done to you? He says, you call me Lord and teacher, and that's right, because I am your Lord. I am your teacher. For you and I am your God. But then watch this. Verse 14. If I, the royalty, your Lord and teacher, if I have washed your feet, if I have stooped down, if I have bowed low, if I have gotten my hands dirty because your feet were dirty, if I have come down to pay for sin, if I have done that, the greatest of the greats, the King of the kings, if I have done that, what then, Lord? Tell us. You also ought to wash one another's feet. You. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. You also ought to wash one another's feet, as I have given you an example of what you should do. If the King of Kings could get off his throne to serve us in humanity, to die a death that he didn't have to die, but he did it for our sake so that we could come to know God once again and to be cleansed from all of sin, then he says, you also ought to now show that example to others. Meaning, get off your throne, get low, and serve all the days of your life. A lot of people think that the pastor is the master, right? The pastor is the one on the throne. There is a truth to that. There is a great weight of reality of the position that I have as a pastor, that the Scripture says I am judged greatly different than you, twice as much as you, on an elevated scale than you, because of my role. But in the Scripture, a pastor is one who does what Christ has done, which means we get low and we bend down and we serve. That's the reality of a pastor, is to serve and to tend the flock and to take care of the flock. So when you see the other end of, you need to do this because I've said so, there's some reality to that, but that's not the attitude that God has. That's not the attitude a pastor should have. And that's not the attitude that any of us should have as individuals, as believers of Christ. That we are of higher, or if we're royalty and y'all need to serve me. It is always the opposite. Royalty serves. Royalty serves. But we have to pay attention here. Because we don't wash feet today, right? Like we literally don't wash feet. So what is it that we do or can we do to wash people's feet? I pondered this for a while, and you probably have a better example than I would have. And if you do, that's great. Share it with me. One of the most humbling tasks I could think of is cleaning toilets. It's one of the most humbling tasks I could think of. What makes it even more humbling is this. What if I came to your house, knocked on your door, and said, "Hey, Mark, glad to see you. Hey, I just wanted to know I came over with my Clorox. I got my brush right here. I'm ready to sparkle up your toilet bowl." Right? You would say, "What? You ain't getting close to my toilet." You know why? Because it is a humbling task to receive that service from someone. Because it's embarrassing. To have someone come, I mean, think about it. I know we're talking about toilets, but think about this. If I was to come to your house and to go to your toilet and I was going to clean it with my own hands and just start scrubbing that bad boy, and I'm going to make it clean, okay, because I care about it, that means that I get to see a side of you that you don't like to show to anybody else, right? So if I can, the only way I can get access to that place is for you to have to say, "Okay, I'm not going to be prideful. This is embarrassing because it shows you a rawness, a realness of who I am. This is a reality of me." The only way you can have access to that is if I humble myself and say, "Okay, yeah, go ahead." See, there's a double humbling there. So when Peter said, "How can you wash my feet?" and Jesus said, "Look, if you don't let me wash your feet, you don't have nothing to do with me." This is what Peter said. Jesus was saying, "Look, Peter, you have to humble yourself to let me wash your feet. You have to be humble enough to accept this. Just as you and I have to be humble enough to say, 'Man, Lord, I don't deserve for you to die on the cross. I am such a great sinner. I have failed you so often. I have messed up so often. How can you die on a cross?' No, I can't. I can't do it, God. I can't accept you." What we're really saying or what we're really showing is pride and a lack of humility. Because what we're doing is saying, "God, my sin is greater than the cross." Think about that. "Jesus, my sin is greater than what you can do." And the fact that you have to humble yourself to do it, I'm not going to lower myself that low to accept that. And Jesus says, if you cannot lower yourself to accept what I've done for you, then you have nothing to do with me. That's what he says. So, scrubbing toilets, to serve one another in the reality, maybe not toilets, it may be something else. You have to humble yourself to serve someone. But as brothers and sisters in Christ, if someone wants to serve you, you have to humble yourself to let them serve you. Because it is a display of the kingdom of God, of one who would come humble himself. He shouldn't have. See, if anyone shouldn't have to do it, it's God. But he did it anyways. And he says, this is an example for you to do it. But here's what's important. So washing feet was a low task. It was a dirty task. But it was also a relational task. Think about this. It was low because you had to get low. You had to go to the feet. It was dirty because it was filthy feet. But Jesus did it in relationship because he wanted to show them who he was. He wanted to show them who God is. He's saying, "Look, I'm serving you because I have a great love. That's who I am." So it's a relational thing. See, here's the mistake that I was talking to Rachel last night. I see this so often in church, in teaching. I used to do it all the time out of good reasoning, but I was just on the wrong track. If I just came this morning and was teaching, look, Jesus served, okay, everybody, we all need to serve. Here's a couple of things that you need to do to go serve. Now serve people, okay? It's a good thing. Jesus did it, we do it. That is a great mistake. A great mistake. And all we're teaching is, what I said was moral, like what we think is right, good teaching that you need to obey. But it has nothing to do with the Lord. That's where we make the mistake. Here's what we have to recognize. Us washing feet today means you're going to do a low task. You have to humble yourself. It's going to be a dirty task, something that nobody really likes to do. Now, what we do in church is we just focus on those two and say, okay, is it low, is it dirty, and then let's go do it. But there's a third reason. It's a relational task. We wash feet and for the motivation and the purpose of relationship. You serve brothers and sisters in this church and outside of this church in your community, not because it's just low and dirty, but because of this relationship. You want people to see who God is. And God says this was who He was and who He is. So you serve in a low and dirty way, in a humbling way, so that other people can say, "What are you doing?" And you can tell them, "I am showing you what God is like. I am showing you what the Bible is about. He is here to rescue you. He has a great love for you. And I do this because I love you. This isn't hard for me." Why is it not hard? Because it can be hard to wash the toilet. But when you're near the Lord and you love the Lord and you recognize what He's done here for you, for your own sin, you can easily go to someone and say, "Hey, what can I do for you? Can I serve you? Can I love you?" It's so easy. But if all we ever talked about was, let's wash some feet, let's do some hard tasks and some dirty tasks, and let's get out there and start doing it, what's going to happen is you're going to get tired. You're going to do it in your own power. You're going to do it for the wrong reasons. You're going to burn out and get angry, and then there's going to be causing division and sin and brokenness, all the things that are not of the kingdom of God. See, the devil can come in here. He's fine with preaching on just good teaching, but he's not fine with Christ teaching, the teaching of the Lord. This is all about God. How do I know that? Look at verse 20. "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me. And whoever receives me receives the one who sent me." He works it backwards. He goes, "Look, I was sent by God the Father into this world to show you who God the Father is so that you can be restored to Him. And if you receive me, then you have a relationship with the Father." He goes, "Now listen to me. I'm sending you out to do the same thing as an example to the world." See? "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me." Saying, you know who the one I send is? That's you and I. So that when we're out serving people for the right reason, so that they would know God and see God's love and see God's glory, and they would receive us and say, "Man, what are you doing?" And they receive the message that we give, which the message is about Jesus, so they're receiving Christ Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way to who? God the Father, the Creator, the one who began Genesis, and the one who created us and began a relationship with us, but we broke it off, and He's been doing this plan to rescue us back to Himself. And the way He does it today isn't through Jesus Christ, because Jesus isn't here. I'm not saying that not through belief in Jesus. He does it through belief in Jesus. But Jesus in human flesh is not here anymore, everybody. He says He has sent us the Holy Spirit. That's the power. That's the fuel. That's the relationship with God. That's that intimacy with God that's going to get you to be able to serve other people. Because you and I are called the body of Christ. We are the person of Christ to the world today, doing the things that God has told us to do with the right motivation, so that others could come to receive Jesus and to receive God and see what the kingdom of God is all about. That's it. Now here's the reality. That's John 13, 1 through 20. Now listen. Are you prepared to adjust your life to what you've been shown this morning? Not by what I've taught you, but by what you've heard from the Lord through the Scripture. We are always to respond to God's word in obedience. To not respond or to respond in disobedience, they're both disobedience. So what does obedience mean for you? It doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. Obedience for you may mean I need to accept Jesus for the first time. I was a Judas. I don't want to be a Judas. I want to be a Peter. I want to believe upon Jesus. The first step for you may be the Peter step, which was, I need to humble myself and really just receive the Lord even more. The step for you may be, I need to start serving in washing feet as Christ served and washed feet because He sent me out as an example. Or the step may be for you, I'm serving and I've believed, I've done these things, but I've been serving in my own strength and the wrong attitude, and my motivation from now on wants to be to serve for the Lord with the Lord. I don't know what your step is, but there's a guarantee that you have a step to take to adjust your life to what God has revealed to you this morning.